I believe the job of the president is to fight for you, the American people, and that's what I'm doing.
All right, thank you.
You're a damn liar, man. That's not true. And no one has ever said that? No one has proved that? No? You see it on the TV. No, I know you do. And by the way, that's why I'm not sedentary. I get up and no, let him go. Let him go. Look, the reason I'm running is because I've been around a long time and I know more than most people know. And I can get things done. That's why I'm running. And you want to check my shape line, let's do push-ups together here, man. Let's run. Let's do whatever you want.
What's up, North Carolina, and welcome back to Liberty Inc., your source for all things liberty in our great Tar Heel state. Stoked to be bringing you yet another incredible episode, as I'm sure you all agree. Today, we are going to be adding a few things that I hope you enjoy as we try to increase the content that is tailored just for libertarians in North Carolina. Justin Hinckley has started what we hope will become a series of Second Amendment and firearm-related safety and usefulness videos. I don't really know how to describe it, honestly. He's way better than I am, but check it out. Today is all about safety and evaluation of safety and how you know if someone is good and being safe with firearms. Then one of my favorite guests I've ever had, Cassie Clark, eighth-generation North Carolinian who has started a blog and podcast called Where the Dogwood Blooms. She goes really deep into the history and lore of our wonderful state, and we talk culture and politics in North Carolina. And then, as always, Dub and Groo talk sports. Please reach out, communications@lpnc.org if you have questions, comments, all your hate mail, trying to get me canceled, that would be awesome. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy.
Okay, hey guys, this is Justin Hinckley. I'm the Second Amendment Liaison Coordinator with the Libertarian Party of North Carolina. Today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the basics of firearm safety. And the point of this is we're going to do some videos in the future going in depth about certain types of shooting, certain types of different activities you can do with firearms, ways you can train. But the number one thing we got to have down before we do anything else is firearm safety. So in order to actually indicate whether or not someone is amateur, professional, whatever, the first thing we want to look at is what their grasp is of firearm safety. Okay, so we're going to talk about the rules, and then we're going to kind of go into how to analyze someone's capabilities in following the rules and what that indicates about your trust level in them and their possible skill level, an indication of their skill level. So rule one is know the condition of your firearm at all times and treat it with the appropriate caution. So rule two, this is the first of the universal rules. Rule two is to never point a firearm at anything you do not intend to shoot. Okay, so that is basic muzzle awareness, right? So right now I'm pointing downrange on a range. The camera is facing uprange. So rule one, so if we say the camera is a person, what we're doing with rule two is simply guiding our firearm around in a way that makes it so that we're not actually pointing directly at it. So if I want to shoot, I'll be over here, and if I need to come across and there's a range, I'll come across, boom, or I'll come across, boom. The idea being is that I never actually point my firearm, I'm not intentionally trying to shoot. So that brings us to rule three. The final rule. Rule three is that we're going to keep our fingers straight off the trigger until we're ready to fire. And you may have noticed when I was just demonstrating, my finger was straight off the trigger the entire time. Alright, when I'm in on a target, boom here, or maybe I'm pressed, my finger might come to the trigger. But generally, my finger is always off the trigger until I'm ready to fire. Okay, and the purpose of these rules, so that's the three rules. The purpose of all three of these rules is the idea that you need to break all three of the rules in order to shoot someone unintentionally. So mainly talking about the two universal rules, right? Finger off the trigger and not pointing the firearm at anything I don't intend to shoot. So if I do accidentally point my firearm at something that I'm not intending to, if my finger's off the trigger, I'm not going to shoot that gun at a person. Or I'm not going to shoot that gun even though I'm pointed at a person. And then reverse that. Say my finger's on the trigger, but it's pointed somewhere where it's supposed to be. Well, if I accidentally press that trigger, I accidentally fire the gun, I'm not pointed at a person. So sure, I might hit a berm, I might hit the ground, I might fire a round up in the air, but I'm not putting a round directly into a person. So even though I might fire the gun negligently, what some people say accidentally, I'm not firing it into a person. Even though I might flag someone accidentally, I'm not putting a round into that person. Or excuse me, I'm not firing a round which will then go into that person. Just real quick, when you're learning firearms, this is particularly for new people, but even for some people who have some experience in the range industry, in the shooting industry, the first sign of an amateur is that they can't handle their firearm in a way that implies mastery of the basics. So like if they're not handling their firearm in a way that's mastery of the basic firearm safety rules, then that's an indication that they are not someone that you should trust. Either their opinions generally on firearms, but more specifically when it comes to the employment of firearms, because they haven't actually mastered the safety rules enough to say this is what we should or shouldn't be doing with the safety rules in mind, with being safe in mind. And kind of on the reversal, if you see someone who has those safety rules down pat, their finger's always off the trigger, they're always being cognizant of where their muzzle is, that is an indication that they're at least at the baseline, that they have mastered those rules. So they could be a professional. At the very least, you know that their professional opinion or their opinion about firearms isn't inherently going to be dangerous, which where someone who can't master those is not going to be like that.
Hey, what's up, North Carolina? I'm really excited about our guest tonight, episode 3 of season 4, trying to bring a little class, a little culture to the podcast. Tonight, I have Cassie Clark, self-described Carolina girl who grew up in 2 towns on opposite sides of our great Tar Heel state. Her family is 8 generations deep in North Carolina, and she says her love for the home state is something she got honest. And when you hear her talk, you'll understand exactly how that comes out. She's passionate about sharing all the things that make this such a great state: history, great outdoors, culture, and the laid back lifestyle. And she shares them all through her blog and podcast, Where the Dogwood Blooms. I will have the links to that in the comments, and I highly recommend all of it. She describes her Where the Dogwood Blooms as her love song to life in the old North State, and ode to sunshine and hurricanes. I've been looking forward to this discussion for a while, so y'all pull up a chair and sit a spell. There's a lot to talk about. And I'm stealing that line from you, Miss Cassie Clark. Thank you for being here. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing quite well. I have been excited for this. I've been doing this podcast for a little over a year now, and we really do focus a lot on politics. And I think that the intertwining of culture and politics is sort of like under discussed, especially in this hyper political environment. And you really get into the culture of it, but you can't avoid some of the politics of North Carolina from the beginning, which you cover in great detail. I learned so much. I've been using the phrase rough music. I had no idea about it, and it's like my new favorite thing. But before we delve into all that, you wanna introduce yourself a little bit to the viewers and explain what got you into what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I have always been a writer. I started blogging, I want to say probably in like 2009. And what happened is my papa died in 2004. And if you read the blog or you listen to me or you follow me on social media, you know my papa was like, that's my hero. And so that got me into genealogy. And then my dad died in 2009. And that was kind of my connection to the mountains at this time. My mama had developed Alzheimer's disease. dementia, but either way, she was starting to lose her memory. She was now living on the coast with my aunt. And so I missed home. And so I started looking for Appalachian blogs and websites, and I found one that I just fell in love with. And so I'd been doing genealogy research since Papaw died, and I was like, okay, I'm going to turn this into a blog. And so that became my first blog. I just talked about my family. And I ended up losing that. Well, I didn't lose it. I gave it up because I got a job where I was making good money. And I was like, okay, well, I don't have time for all of this. And so a few years pass, and I'm suddenly a stay-at-home mom. I'm homeschooling 2 kids, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do now? And so I started thinking about the blog that I had found that had kind of made me feel like I was back at home again. And I was like, it would be great if there was one of those for North Carolina. And so I started doing research. Like, is there a blog out there that's, all about the culture of North Carolina? And I couldn't find one. Like, all the blogs out there that are about North Carolina, I hate to say it, most of them aren't North Carolinians. And they kind of sell this false version of North Carolina, and it depressed me. And I was like, okay, this needs to be fixed. And so I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And one day I woke up and I was like, I'm going to start a blog today. And so, and then it just steamrolled from there. It went from being a blog to being a podcast, and then social media started getting big, and here I am.
Very cool. It's interesting. So I am unfortunately not a native North Carolinian. I've been here for about 15 years now. My son is, but I've been to the Outer Banks every year of my life and traveled a good bit of the state, and that's why we moved here. Like, we looked for jobs in North Carolina because our goal was to get to North Carolina and be in North Carolina for the rest of our lives. So I've been fortunate to see a lot of the state, but listening to your blog, I mean, you've been all over the state. So what's your favorite place in North Carolina?
My favorite place in North Carolina, I have so many, so this one's hard, but I think it's Bryson City. So my dad's family's from Western North Carolina, and my mama was born in Forney's Creek, which is in Bryson City. And as I've gotten older, whenever I go home, so Canton is home, and whenever I go there, it's not really the same anymore now that my family is gone. And so I like to go to the mountains, but I don't want to be somewhere that kind of makes me sad the whole time I'm there. So I go to Bryson City. It's still quaint and charming and beautiful, but it's also very deeply tied to my family. And so I feel at home there. And so that's probably my favorite place.
Okay, very cool. That's a good answer. Where's somewhere you haven't been yet that you want to go?
Ooh, so I may have been when I was younger and not remember it, but Bath and Edenton, I have not been to those 2 places as far as I remember. And I know that you're a huge fan of Blackbeard. So
Yes.
So I am too. I don't know as much about him as you probably do, but I definitely would love to go and like experience that culture out there, because I know that the Outer Banks is way different from southeastern North Carolina, where I spent most of my life. So yeah, I think that those are 2 that I definitely want to see.
Okay. So that's, people that know me, I never shut up about it. My favorite place is Ocracoke. In fact, so I've been married a long time. We got married young, coming up on 19 years actually. But when we were engaged, I told her, like, you have my solemn oath, like, I will always take care of us. I will always take care of our family. I ask only one thing, and that's that we retire on Ocracoke. And she was like, yeah, of course. But I love the Outer Banks, and yes, the Blackbeard lore. So yeah, tried to get down to this state. But let me ask you this then: what state after North Carolina? Like, what's your favorite non-North Carolina state?
Okay, so I love this question because a lot of people don't realize that I'm very well traveled. I'm actually very well traveled. I have not been out to the extreme west yet, and I have not been to the northeast yet. But Hawaii is my favorite state other than North Carolina. And the reason for that is because they have a very, very strong, unique culture. It's not something that you're going to experience anywhere else in the United States. It's a beautiful place. It's like you step off the airplane and the scent of plumeria is just smack you in the face.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. And the way that they relate to one another and their different words and all these different things. It was just a wonderful experience. I advise everyone to go at least once. It's incredible.
Hawaii is an amazing state. There's a ukulele player, Tamani, who I'm a big fan of, and she's like, what she does with the ukulele, it's like Slash with a guitar.
That's saying a lot. I'm the biggest Guns N' Roses fan of all time.
Well, that's interesting. I'm a fan, but I consider Slash to be probably the best guitarist to have ever lived.
I would agree with that. My dog is named Axel. My favorite song is Sweet Child of Mine. Like, I am a huge Guns N' Roses fan.
Very interesting. All right.
I actually got to go see them. My husband took me.
Just recently?
When was it? Yeah, it was like 2 years ago, I think,
Yeah.
when they were here in North Carolina. Dude, I cried through the entire concert.
That's awesome. I missed the show. I was out of town. I try to catch a lot of shows, and we do have an amazing. It's the music of North Carolina is one of the things that I think people don't realize and runs deep. Some of my favorite bands come out of here, and I love bluegrass. So I'm listed like Mandolin Orange, Delta Ray. I don't know if the Abbott Brothers are North Carolina. They play here all the time, but I should know that.
I don't know. I should know that, and I don't know.
Fair enough. Well, but we talk culture, and your podcast goes into culture. The culture of North Carolina. You actually discussed this on one of your historical podcasts, and this is the one I think where rock music came up, where sort of there was the law, and then there was like the morality, and the people of North Carolina were much more interested in the morality that they had agreed to, and liberty was a big part of the North Carolina morality. But it feels like politicians have done everything they can to undermine that, as long as we've been a state. I mean, as you look back at the history, at a high level, where do you see politics and culture overlap in our state? And then where do you see it changing recently?
So I think that politics and culture overlap entirely. So, I mean, our culture, it encompasses people's attitudes, our perspectives, our opinions, our beliefs. It literally covers everything. And so that directly impacts the way that you vote. And so there's no way to separate those two things. So historically speaking, North Carolina has always been a little more conservative. And I don't mean that in like a kind of stuffy way, because of exactly what you said. You know, we have always been, we're all about our liberty. And so at times, because we're also very religious, those two things kind of bump up against each other a little bit. And so when you look at the history of North Carolina, you can see that in things like during Prohibition, moonshine was still going very strong here in the state of North Carolina. When you talk about marijuana prohibition in North Carolina, everybody smokes pot in North Carolina. Like, you would be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't, whether they'll admit that or not. It's kind of one of those things where, religiously speaking, we vote against it, but everybody's doing it anyway. So it's almost like I don't know a good way to put this. It's almost like we vote things in, but we know that we're going to do the opposite thing anyway. And that, to me, is probably one of the most North Carolinian things ever.
That's pretty funny.
But yeah, it is changing. And to me, that's a little scary. You know, locals have never been radical. North Carolina is not a radical place. And as people move in, radicalization is becoming very prominent in our state. And that worries me. Just because of kind of like what I said, like, to me, it's perfectly normal that marijuana is illegal. And, you know, I drive by somebody and they have their windows down and I know they're smoking a blunt while they're going down the road. And that doesn't bother me, you know, or the fact that, you know, you're not supposed to make liquor at home. And Lord knows the first sip of alcohol I ever had came out of a moonshine jar. So watching it change, I'm not sure how that's going to impact our culture. I know that things are becoming more intense. We're seeing things that we've never seen before. There's kind of radical ideologies that are getting taught in schools. The recent legislation, what is it? Sports gambling got passed. Now we're talking about the proposal of medical marijuana. For North Carolina, these are radical things. Now, whether I support them or not, is different on how I feel about the way that impacts the culture of our state, if that makes sense.
It does. And it's interesting. So you talk a lot about the degradation of traditional North Carolina culture. I think there's an overlap. So culture evolves. It always evolves. It's not just here, it's everywhere. That's the nature of culture. And progress drives that. And I think that's distinct from like progressive politics. But when you invent the automobile, for example, then the culture moves from horse and buggy to cars, and then you have roads and what that entails. You mentioned, though, a lot of the degradation of culture is sort of people that transplant here, but then have no respect for kind of the history of how we got here. Do you see that manifest in politics? And if so, where? Is it politicians? Is it campaign messaging?
So I don't know that I'm seeing it as much with politicians yet, but I'm seeing it in other areas. Like when there were the I don't want to call them riots, but there were the protests over the Hamas Israel kind of stuff. That was not a North Carolina thing. You know what I mean? That was not, when that happened here in North Carolina, my mind was blown. I was like, that's not something that happens in North Carolina. You know what I mean? Like that's something that happens in New York or New Jersey or somewhere else. And so it didn't surprise me that it happened on college campuses, because there's a lot of people on college campuses who aren't from here. But you kind of see it there. Something else that we are seeing as the population booms, we're getting more radicals. And so I'm talking on both sides of the aisle here. There are people who are hardcore Republicans moving in. There are people who are hardcore liberals moving in.
They don't even have principles. It's just sort of a fealty to a team.
Right. And that's not really a North Carolina kind of thing. I mean, you have to think, I grew up in two different parts of the state, with part of my family being Democrat and part of my family being Republican, and everybody was more kind of centered. And so I'm kind of this weird blend of the two. I call myself like I'm a common sense moderate, I guess. You know what I mean? Like I don't do radical anything. That's way out of my repertoire. And so, but yeah, I mean, we're seeing this happen. And so I think that that's horrible. It's horrible for our culture. It's horrible for our state. It's horrible for politics. It's just bad all the way around. I think it's awful. And so when people move in, I want them to know you're moving in amongst a group of locals who have always gotten along, regardless of how we voted. You know, we could sit down at the dinner table and eat together, knowing that, grandma voted Democrat and daddy voted Republican, and and it was never a big deal. And now all of a sudden it's becoming a big deal. And so I don't want that to happen to the point where it divides our state to where we can't get along anymore, because that's not North Carolina at all. We always have gotten along.
So I'm going to keep working on you over time to become libertarian, because we're really radical with the radical idea that you should not hurt people and not take their stuff.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
That's the foundation of our philosophy. So you touched on this. You come from two sides of North Carolina. You have people in your family representing many different, not just politics, but places in North Carolina, histories in North Carolina. I want to get into the moonshining stuff in a little bit, because it was interesting, very interesting to be the history there. What, though, would you say, like you mentioned, sitting down at the dinner table and breaking bread together, what's the common culture of our state that really does unify us?
So whenever we were emailing about this, you said that I bring up a lot the differences between the state. And I talk about those a lot. which made me feel kind of bad because there are all of these things that unite North Carolina from one end to the other. And first of all, I think that people need to realize that even though North Carolina has different little subcultures all across the state, we fall underneath the larger umbrella of Southern culture. And so Southern culture, everything about North Carolina falls under that umbrella. And so that ties us together. And then there's barbecue, which, you know, I'm always fighting with people about barbecue.
You were like 10 minutes ago. Someone said South Carolina's was better.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the state of North Carolina, barbecue is now, and it means pork. And that is true no matter where you're at in North Carolina. If we're talking about purest North Carolina style barbecue, it is pork. Now, we might squabble about, you know, sauce.
Well, then I was going to say, do you like vinegar or mustard base?
Well, mustard base is South Carolina. That's not North Carolina.
I thought that was southeastern North Carolina.
No. So
interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
I learned something.
Southeastern North Carolina is like it's vinegar based, it's spicy. Lexington style is ketchup and vinegar based. No mustard in North Carolina. That is South Carolina. Yeah.
All right. Well, that worked. I like the vinegar base. So
yeah. So the barbecue brings us together. Another thing, moonshine. Everybody always associates moonshine with Western North Carolina. Totally get it. Love me some popcorn Sutton. You know, spent a lot of my time in Western North Carolina, but moonshine is actually very common across the entire state. It has been probably since we very first got settled. People are still making it all across the state. We're rebellious. North Carolinians are very rebellious, and we kind of have this attitude of don't tell me what to do. And so if you tell a North Carolinian what to do, there's a good chance that they're going to tell you to screw off, and they're going to do what they want to anyway, because don't tell me what to do. I can do what I want. We are partiers. A lot of people don't give us enough credit for this, but when I say that, you know, I don't know if you've heard of Old Christmas before, but Old Christmas comes to mind. So basically what happened is when the colonies switched from we switched from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. And what happened is we lost 12 days. So North Carolinians were not happy about Christmas being moved to December 25th. And so they decided, we're going to party that entire week until Old Christmas. And that's what they did. And so that's how Old Christmas became this really big phenomenon in the Outer Banks. It's still kind of a phenomenon in Western North Carolina. People still party and throw down for this entire week. You can see it at ECU. Everybody knows ECU is the party school.
Interesting.
No matter where you're at in the state, if you're hanging out with locals like to party and have a good time. We're laid back all across the state. My husband laughs at me because I'm half hillbilly and half beach bum, and he says that I'm one of the laziest people he knows. Well, that's part of my culture. You know what I mean? I am a relaxer. I like to chill. I try not to stress about things, which is kind of hard for have severe anxiety, but I like to just chill. That's my main goal in life, is to be relaxed. And you know, something else that I think is really funny is, you know, I can't remember who said it and what it was about specifically, but someone once historically visited North Carolina, and they basically said that we were like these ignorant fools who just were full of pride for no reason. I would 100% agree with that.
I love it.
We are proud of things that would make other people shake their heads. We're proud of being Southern. We're proud that we have that rebellious streak. We're proud that we're a little lazy. Like, you can't shame me. Like, I am proud of me and where I'm from and my family, and that's just how it is. And I feel like that's something that's pretty common all across North Carolina, if we're being honest with ourselves.
Okay. So I have heard of Old Christmas. I've seen Old Christmas celebration stuff on the Outer Banks. I had no idea where it came from. So that's awesome to learn.
Yeah.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. The theme to our last Libertarian State Convention was Cheers to Rebellion. And my happy place is a bonfire on the beach with a good Carolina bourbon in my hand. So it's 100% get what you're saying. But you also, we have that, but there's an underlying morality. Like Southern culture comes with a morality. It's so I'm from DC, and it's weird because I have this great love for my home city, but like hate for everything there. I don't know how to explain it. But I go and it's like I'm waving and saying hi to everyone, and people are like, "What's wrong with you? Why just wave at me?" Like talking to people on an elevator. But there's this underlying connection. Like, hey, the South gets it, but I think we sort of earned it. Like iron sharpens iron. We were forged this way. And there were cultural battles that got us there, and especially for North Carolina. So I mentioned Blackbeard. Like I love talking about Blackbeard. Again, plug in, check out the Blackbeard Museum. But we had an early gold rush. Of course, the Civil War was a major cultural event, and then Reconstruction here, and a lot that went on with that. We had a very fraught relationship, especially with the Cherokee, but with all the native tribes that were here, that had some real bad downs and some very interesting ups. The Wright brothers, we learned to fly here. What am I missing?
So much.
Okay.
So much. You know, a lot of people don't know this, but Wilmington and Brunswick Town were very big into the Sons of Liberty and protesting and all these different kinds of things during the American Revolution. They burned effigies. They ran off tax collectors. They actually made the British so mad that the British came and burned down Brunswick Town. So if that hadn't have happened, Wilmington probably it may not be as big as it is right now, because these were two competing towns right across from each other on the river. And so this kind of goes back to what I said earlier about us being rebellious. I mean, that right there, I mean, this has been going on forever, all the way back to colonial times. I mean, when you talked about rough music, you know, rough music is basically, it was, you know,
the greatest thing.
Yeah. So North Carolina, we have our state laws, but back in the day, we also had these kind of moral standards. And if someone went against them, people used rough music against them. And it was basically, you know, dragging them through the street, burning their house down. Like they weren't going to tolerate.
To clarify, because you get into detail on this, the morality was enforced. So if you get caught like having an affair, the townspeople would step in and do something about it, but you're not getting dragged out and having your house burned down. But if you're collecting excessive taxes or running up charges on land grants, like the stories are insane. Like 10 people just busting in on a judge, tying him to a chair, putting a gun to his head, setting fire to his house. Like, how dare you up our taxes? I was cheering as I was listening to it.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, to me, you can still kind of see that North Carolinians tend to have a different attitude about fighting. I can't think of a single person my age who hasn't been in multiple fist fights. Like I seriously can't. Like, and I will be the first to tell you, like, if you come at me wrong, like I might slap you. Like and that's just, I mean, that's the way I grew up. It's not like I'm a violent person. I'm not. But if you are coming at me, like a friend of mine was telling me a story, you know, she's into politics and she was at something and some lady walked up to her and was poking her in the chest. And I was like, not me. Yeah. You would poke me one time and you wouldn't get that finger back. Like, because that's part of my culture. Like, you're not going to physically harm me. Like, if you touch me, it's on. And so, you know, to me, that goes back to the way that my parents operate, the way my grandparents operate. They got that from their grandparents and their grandparents and so on, going all the way back. And so rough music to me just makes perfect sense. It's something that just clicks in my mind. It's something I can identify with. Like, this is something I kind of, as I was listening to my guest who was talking about it, Nicole Williams, I was like, wow, it kind of blows my mind that that's not still happening. You know what I mean? But, you know, there's other things too. I mean, of course, when we talk about the Revolutionary War, a lot of people don't know this. There were a lot of Tories here in North Carolina, a lot of them, because we had a heavy Scottish population at the time. And so, you know, our people were literally fighting each other. And what blows my mind about this, especially when you talk about today, there are actual monuments here in North Carolina that are dedicated to the Tories who fought against us in the Revolutionary War. Why? Because they were North Carolinians. And so you can actually see that monument at Moores Creek Battlefield. I'm trying to think another good one, because you brought up the Native Americans. William Holland Thomas was born in Haywood County. Woohoo! So if you don't know, Canton is in Haywood County.
Well, I do, because I researched beforehand, but
Okay.
not everyone makes sense.
So he was basically adopted by the Cherokee tribe. He was the one and only white man who ever served as a chief of the Eastern Band of the Cherokee. And with his help, the Qualla boundary was established, and the Western North Carolina Cherokee were able to avoid the Trail of Tears. And to me, that just speaks majorly to what hillbillies are like. You know, because we're talking about the area of my Mama and Papa. And so when I was little, Mama would tell me stories about, you know, the Cherokee ladies who would teach them different little things, whether it be about medicine or whatever it was. And so, you know, I grew up on these stories, and of course we lived pretty close to Cherokee. And so I think that speaks volumes about the spirit of North Carolina, you know, is once again, don't tell us what to do. And it was like they saw somebody being treated wrong, and so they stepped in. Let's see, the creation of beach music. A lot of people just kind of overlook this like it's no big deal. Well, yeah, it really was. So what you're talking about, was a time of segregation. The civil rights movement hadn't started yet. And in Carolina Beach, this white guy who owned dance halls started going over to the black part of the beach and listening to their music, fell in love with it, started putting it into his dance halls. And then all of a sudden you've got white kids who are embracing black culture for the very first time. I mean, so this is huge. I'm trying to think.
Well, there's already so much to unpack. You've said so many awesome things. So first of all, if you haven't read Black Rednecks and White Liberals by Thomas Sowell, he has a whole section dedicated, and it starts from the Scottish Highlanders who came down and the influence they had, which I just thought was interesting. You mentioned it. Then you were just talking about the musical found or inspiration to begin desegregation, excuse me. So Daryl Davis is a contemporary civil rights activist. He's a black boogie woogie piano player, and I had the great privilege of actually putting on an event with him. But in 1983, I think so. He's real good. He was Chuck Berry's piano player for like 30 years, and his band was going to play in Upper Maryland, just north of Baltimore. And they called him when they found out he was black, and they said, "You can't play. This is KKK country." And he was like, his famous statements, "How can someone hate me if they don't know me?" So he found out who the Grand Wizard was there, and he had his secretary set up a meeting. The guy didn't know he was meeting a black guy. And they meet at this hotel. The story's insane. I'm not even going to try because I can't do it justice. But fast forward to now, and he has over 260 robes from Klansmen that have turned them over and left the Klan. One of them's one of his best friends. Another one, he walked his daughter down the aisle at her wedding. It's just unbelievable, but it all came from music. And he talks about just how powerful that the musical drive there is. But the thing I really want to get into, and you mentioned it, is the Native American influence in North Carolina, and in particular, the Cherokee. So first of all, shout out the Eastern Band of Cherokee, the only Native American tribe that has had a Libertarian affiliate in the United States, which I think was pretty awesome. But we do have sort of this up and down sordid history with the Cherokee. You mentioned the Trail of Tears, obviously not a shining moment in U.S. history, to say the least. But can you talk about just where Native American have influenced culture in North Carolina and where you still see it today, and maybe where politicians are still overstepping?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you talk about Native American influence, so first of all, I don't know if you know this or not, but I have Cherokee cousins through my mama. I have Lumbee cousins through my papa, and then I have first cousins who are Waccamaw Sioux through my mom. So I've kind of always grown up with a Native influence in my life in one way or another. But yeah, you see them all over the place, and it kind of blows my mind that people don't connect the dots. Like, a lot of the places that you see that you go, wow, that name sounds kind of weird. That's because it's Native, like Cullowhee, Hatteras, Ocracoke,
Oh yeah.
Catawba. I mean, all of these things, they're native. Then there's, our foods, like we eat corn all the time. You don't ever think that's Native American. It absolutely is. Tomatoes, sweet potatoes, maple syrup, cornbread, hoe cakes, all of these things are here because of Native Americans. And then, we have a lot of legends in North Carolina that are Native inspired that a lot of us know, particularly in Western North Carolina. And please forgive me if I say this wrong, but the Judicala, I think I said it right. Then you've got the Moon people of Western North Carolina, which actually is like a really cool story. It's basically...
According to Cherokee legend, the rich Appalachian Mountains once housed a mysterious tribe known as the Moon-Eyed people. Despite the fact that they vanished centuries before the Cherokee acquired these lands, strange relics survived, providing clues to their buried history. The Moon-Eyed people were described as being short and pale, having milky white skin and large, sun-sensitive eyes. They only emerged from their underground homes at night or in severe fog to hunt and forage. The Cherokee uncovered the old stone tools and weaponry of the Moon-Eyed tribes dispersed across the mountains. Most peculiar were the high stone walls crafted to protect their settlements, with no evidence of doors or entries amid the ruins. The Georgia Parks Division of the Department of Natural Resources has a marker at Fort Mountain that mentions legends about the wall's origin. Of the Moon-Eyed people, the plaque says, "These people are said to have been unable to see during certain phases of the moon. During one of these phases, the Creek people annihilated the race. Some believe the Moon-Eyed people built the fortifications on this mountain." So, where did the enigmatic Moon-Eyed people really depart to, and why did they vanish so abruptly?
It's basically about these pale-skinned, blue-eyed people, and they couldn't come out in the daylight because the sun hurt their eyes. It almost sounds like a vampire story. And I don't know, I can't do it justice, so I'm not going to get into it, but it's really cool. I mean, but you grow up around these
I'll
things.
check it out immediately after this now.
Yeah, I mean, we grow up around these things and surrounded by them, and we just don't ever go, oh wow, that's where that came from. And we do the same thing with Black culture here in North Carolina. It drives me absolutely insane because I spent most of my life in Wilmington, and Pender County is the head of the Gullah Geechee corridor. And I'm sure you've heard me probably talk about this before, but the Gullah Geechee influence in southeastern North Carolina is extremely heavy. We're talking about, haint blue porch ceilings. You see them all across Wilmington. That came from the Gullah Geechee. Bottle trees, the Gullah Geechee. Low country style foods, that came from the Gullah Geechee. So all of these things that we consider to be, innately North Carolinian, they wouldn't be here without either the Native Americans or the Gullah Geechee. So yeah, I mean, they've definitely had major influences on us.
That's really cool. That answer, I was expecting a good answer, but you really got into details. I just learned a whole bunch of stuff, and I will go research that afterwards. It's fascinating to me, not just the culture, but the intertwining historically. Like, one of the things that originally got me interested in this state when I was very young. I've been to the beaches. I love the beaches. I love the East Coast. I love the Atlantic Ocean. But it was learning about the lost colony of Roanoke that and people don't realize how much that even existed because of Native Americans, and how there probably would not have been any settlements on the coast for much, much longer without cooperation. And then you really start to see North Carolina grow and prosper, and to a large degree because we had coastal access, which, I mean, you rewind, like there weren't tall buildings and cars and steamboats. They were just sailing ships, and they needed a place to dock. It's awesome to talk about. And then, so I actually, because I went back and forth on like what questions to ask you, and I was like, how much should we get into food? And then I was like, I have a feeling she's going to mention barbecue. I'll keep all the other food out of it because that could be like a 20-minute discussion in and of itself. But I'm glad you brought it up. But it also, it's the rebellious spirit. So like, I'm the first one to say, like, I'm not a big identity politics person. Like, people are people. I'm big on like, there's one race, the human race sort of thing. But then I also very much recognize that there have been very, very racially divisive and racist things that our government has done. I'm libertarian. I always blame the government. But for Black History last month, I was sort of looking into some of the rebellious things that came from North Carolina. And you talk about this, we won't be told what to do. And like the Wentworth Four were from North Carolina.
Yes, they were.
And I was like, that's so badass. Like, I want to go sit there with them. But it's that spirit really, like, it rises up everywhere.
Yeah, and it's not, that's what I was going to say. It's not something that's divided by race. It's all of us. It's all of us. All North Carolinians are this way. It's not like it's just the white people, it's the Black people, it's the Native Americans, it's all of us. If you have roots here, it's just kind of something that's been handed down to you because it's so ingrained in our culture. Like, it's just, you pick up on it. And so, yeah, I mean, people often overlook North Carolina when it comes to the civil rights movement. And that just drives me crazy because, like I said, when we were talking about the beach music thing, you know, I had aunts and uncles at that time who were down there shagging to beach music. And whether they ever thought of it or not, I mean, that was a simple little act of rebellion that ended up becoming kind of this kickoff point for the civil rights movement here in North Carolina. And so, yeah, I mean, it's wild, like, that we all kind of have this kind of these similar attitudes that kind of bring us together that people overlook because of, you know, stupid little things like politics.
Well, okay, so that's an interesting segue because you could sit here and talk North Carolina culture and history for hours, and I'm not kidding because I listen to your podcast. Like, you really, really could just. But, and as you mentioned at the beginning, culture and politics almost in lockstep. We do have this sort of rebellious spirit. I believe that the things that bring us together as a people are much stronger than the elitist forces that are trying to pull us apart. But again, I'm very libertarian. Like, I don't even believe in government. So, but that's the politics side from a political influence on you, Cassie, the person. So you've been pretty upfront about where you stand politically, but also that you are not attempting to be political with what you're doing. And you're
Right.
clear about this. Everyone is welcome and no infighting is tolerated. The Queen of North Carolina smashed her scepter down, and I've seen it happen. How often does the politics come up though? Like, how much do you have to deal with it?
Every day.
Yeah.
On every post I make, almost every day. And I mean, what's cool though is like, I'm very, very upfront and honest about it. I'm like, every once in a while, I reintroduce myself. I tell everybody, hey, I don't do fighting. I don't do drama. We're all nice to each other here. I don't do hate. I don't do politics. So don't comment that here. If you comment it, I'm going to ask you not to. And then if I have to get ugly, I'm going to get ugly. And that's what I do. So, I mean, yeah, it comes up almost every day. But for the most part, especially with people who are from North Carolina, they tend to be pretty respectful of it because I think they recognize, like, of course I have political opinions. I'm not pushing them off on you. I don't want you to push yours off on me. Like, I want a place where we can all come and learn and talk about North Carolina and joke about being North Carolinian, because I think we should be able to laugh at ourselves. You know, that's what I want. And people, for the most part, are pretty respective of me about that. don't get me wrong, there's a few people that I've had to be ugly with or block, but it does not happen often.
So you're kind of blowing up. Is the temptation to get more politically involved over there? Because I've got to imagine there's pressure too.
There is. I actually have had the same person on me wanting me to come back to Wilmington and run for mayor for like weeks now. And I'm like, so, I mean, just honestly, like, I was a wild child. I had a real damn good time growing up. And so, I don't want, things that I did when I was young and dumb brought up in front of my kids and in front of my mom. And like, nobody wants to deal with that. So can't see myself ever getting in politics. However, I do kind of view what I do as a sort of activism, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know if you saw it, but today I did a podcast about Rosenwald schools. And
I haven't listened to it yet. I saw you put it up there.
Rosenwald schools were they were schools that were created during segregation for the education of Black students. And so I had someone come on who actually attended a Rosenwald school. And it was the first time in my life that I've ever had a frank conversation with someone about segregation from their point of view. That's something that, just doesn't happen. It's not something that gets brought up. You know what I mean? That's not something that people are.
It's also, it's an older generation now.
Right. But it's not something that in my entire life, I mean, I'm 40 years old. I've never had anybody ever sit down and like really talk to me about their experiences during that. And so for me, that was like a life-changing conversation. And listening to her and her experiences and knowing that these schools are out there and they're kind of, a lot of them are decaying, they're falling down. No one cares about them. Nobody wants to protect them. That really chaps my ass. Like, to me, that's, I mean, it's a part of, and don't get me wrong, I feel the same way about, and I said this during the podcast, I feel the same way about Confederate monuments and statues and that kind of stuff. Like, to me, history is there. It needs to be preserved and protected, even the parts that you don't agree with or you think are ridiculous or however you may feel about it. Maybe those parts that are just a little more unpleasant are the ones that we should be fighting to protect the most, because those are the things that we don't want to happen again. And so having a very clear understanding of those things and being able to talk about them and respect one another about them, I think that's a big deal. And so, I'm doing something that no one else is doing. I'm pointing out, hey, here's this thing that, no one cares about that we should care about, whether that be the fact that North Carolina accents are dying, or whether that be, about traditions that are just kind of going away, or whatever it may be. I'm trying to light a fire under people and go, hey, while everybody's in a rush to change, let's not forget that, we have these amazing things that have been handed down that have survived for generations for a reason. And if you let them go, they're never coming back. And so to me, I mean, that is a kind of activism.
I love that. I think that, so I don't know how many like active libertarians but it's not like, do you believe in conspiracy theories? It's how thick is your tinfoil hat? So I tend to be less conspiratorial. I tend to think that a lot of what we see going on in politics can be explained by incentive, just human psychology, is that people do what they're incentivized to do, and we're incentivized to hoard power. But that doesn't make it any less nefarious. And what I see is this attempt to control the population. And one of the best ways to control population is to destroy the culture, the things that bring them together. And you replace the culture with government, essentially. And it's not, the small g government is different than the state, because you're always going to organize somehow. There's always going to be a government. But this is the enforcement of the state, the belief in the state, the 1984 style Big Brother is your God. So I love hearing you try to preserve it. from a libertarian perspective, and we despise the government and all its machinations. So one of the things that we are really pushing back against, and I'd love to get your take on this, is the alcohol beverage control, the ABC. And I don't know how much you've studied the history of this, but like literally an active white supremacist segregationist founded the ABC. He was a big prohibitionist. He had a whole team of white supremacists. Like this was a very, we love to say things come from a racist place. Often they don't, often that's misconstrued. The ABC did. Your family was part of the beautiful resistance. You had moonshiners, and I believe you even had relatives that were given the death penalty for standing up against the sheriff in like the 1910s or 1920s, correct?
Yes, I did. Okay, so first of all, let me say I'm one of these weirdos who were like, I don't care if these laws are there because if I want moonshine, I'm gonna go get it.
Yeah. Cheers.
But and to me, like I said, that's kind of part of my culture. Now, do I think that alcohol should be regulated? No, but I'm also one of those people who's a purist about moonshine. And I think that if you buy it legally, it's not really moonshine. So it kind of takes the fun away from it if you legalize it to where everybody can make it. So I don't know how I feel about that when we're talking about culture specifically. You know what I mean? Do I think it should be what ultimately I think I would like to see it be decriminalized so that it's still naughty, but you don't really get in trouble for it. But yes, so yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. This goes back to what I said earlier about moonshine being literally available and made all across North Carolina. So my mama's family from Swain County, they were moonshiners. I have a photo of my great mama with her brothers and sisters standing in front of my uncle's still. They're drinking moonshine like out of like one of those gourd things. This was taken back in probably the 20s or 30s. Great picture. My papa ran moonshine from Swain County into Haywood County, and what he would do is he would pick up the moonshine, he would drive and park his car in front of the Haywood County courthouse. He would leave it unlocked. He would go out to lunch. When he got back, the moonshine was out of the trunk and there was money in the glove box. And then he would drive back to Swain County and take his cut and get to go home with the money that he made.
It's so awesome.
My granddaddy was from the Uwaris, and there are rumors that him and his family were into moonshine too. But my favorite one is the one that you brought up, which was yes. So I am related to Charles William Stewart and William Elbert Stewart. So they were actually from Virginia. And so what happens is they leave Virginia, they move to Brunswick County, and they marry one of my Walker relatives, or the son does. He married, I can't remember her name, but something Tebow, Electra something Tebow, but she was a Walker descendant. And so the Stewarts were making moonshine in Brunswick County. And as the story goes, they were ambushed by lawmen. And this was Leon George and Sam Lilly. And when they were ambushed, there was a shootout. The two lawmen got killed. The Stewarts were later arrested. They're the only father and son who were ever put to death. And this happened in 1924. I believe they were actually executed in 1925. So after this goes down, locals start coming forward and saying that the lawmen had actually been harassing the Stewarts and that they basically sided with the Stewarts and said, you know, what these lawmen did was wrong. It turned, of course, I don't know if that's true or not, but what's really funny about this is not only am I related to the Stewarts, I am related to Leon George, the guy that they murdered, right? Okay, so these guys are actually cousins through marriage all through my Walker line. And all three of them are buried in the same cemetery in Wilmington.
Interesting. North Carolina roots run deep.
Yeah.
I love that story, though. You do make an interesting point. I also had a bit of a wild childhood. I'm still working on growing up. But some of the getting away with it makes it more fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
so
I'm sorry. So the spirit is definitely still alive in North Carolina. I mean, just because, like I said, like I'm completely against somebody going to jail for making moonshine. 100%. It's part of my culture on all sides of my family. It's something that I've grown up on. Like I said, and it's not a joke. My very first sip of alcohol was moonshine. Of course, I was sneaking it, but whatever. I mean, that was my first sip of alcohol was moonshine. And so I think that that's probably actually really common in my family. Um, but yeah, I mean, you can still find moonshine all across the state if you know the right
it's
people, you know, I mean, it's really common. Like this is something that I don't see dying in North Carolina probably ever,
and
whether
if
they
it's
change
done
the law
right,
or
it's
not.
delicious.
Yeah.
So coming full circle to the idea of childhood. So I don't know where this question is going to go. It has potential to be perhaps the most political, but you mentioned you homeschool both your kids. I homeschool my son. My daughter's at a Catholic high school, but what drove you to make the decision to homeschool?
So we
And
moved. Go
just
ahead.
for quick background, like I think education is a very important part. Now that doesn't always mean schooling, but education is an important part of any culture. And so when you start talking about educating the children in North Carolina and you're so engrossed in it, you've made this decision. That's what made me curious. Like what drove you to make the decision?
So we moved. So we bounced back and forth from Fayetteville to Wilmington for years until we bought our house. And we left Fayetteville and went to Wilmington. And my daughters were going to the same elementary school that I had gone to when I was like 8 years old, 9 years old when I first moved to Wilmington. And I was all excited about it. And it took about a year to realize that things in the education system in Wilmington were not what I had grown up with. And there were just little things that kept happening that was just like blowing my mind. Like my my daughter was being picked on and I was like, you know, smack that kid one time and they'll stop. You know what I mean? And she was literally terrified. And I'm like, why are you worried about what the school is going to do? You need to worry about what I'm going to do. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not telling you to like try to kill anybody. I'm saying don't let somebody bully you. Stick up for yourself. If someone is pulling your hair and you know, you shouldn't be coming home in tears. And so that was the first thing. Like that really bothered me. Like you should not be teaching children not to defend themselves. Like that is a huge deal to me. Like I said, from North Carolina, fighting is really not that big of a deal for me as long as you know when to stop and you're not, you know, sometimes that's the best way to handle disagreements, in my opinion. And so that bothered me that she was genuinely more scared of getting trouble at school than she was of you know us. That kind of bothered me. Like that was a big weird thing for me. And then one day she came home and she had all of these like political kind of ideas in her little head that she didn't even comprehend. And so I'm one of those parents where like when it came to religion, when it comes to politics, I wanted my kids to have the information to be able to make their own decision. And I figured one day we would sit down and talk about that. I did not think it was going to happen at 8 or 9 years old. And so when I had to sit down, my, you know, 9 year old kid and have like a real serious conversation with her about the candidate that she suddenly supported and thought that, you know, you were an evil person if you didn't agree with them, and break it down for her. I kind of pulled my husband off to the side and that was the first time I brought it up. I was like, hey, look, I really think maybe we should start looking into homeschooling or something because something's not right. And so things just kept like downward spiraling from there. It was like the girls were, they both got sick and they had been out of school for probably 2 or 3 days. And we lived really close to the school. And I'm one of those moms, like my kids running a fever, I'm not going to send them to school to get
Yeah.
everybody else sick. Like that had never
Plus, it
been an
sucks for the
issue.
kid. I'm with you.
Yeah, that had never been an issue when we were in Fayetteville. Suddenly, the school social worker knocks on our door
That's why we have the
And
Second Amendment. If a social worker shows up at my door for my kids.
and I open the door and I'm just like flabbergasted, shocked that there is a social worker standing at my door. My kids have come nowhere near missing their amount of allotted days. Like, I sent, a note in letting them know that she was sick. Like, there's no reason for the social worker to be here. And so I was not very nice because I mean, she was asking all these questions. Have you taken them to the doctor? Why haven't you taken them to the doctor? They're running 100 temperature. It's not like it's 105. I've been
Yeah,
a
they
mom.
got a
Like,
cold.
yeah,
They got a
like,
bad cold.
yeah, like they'll be there when they're there. Like, leave, you know what I mean? Like, and then I think what really got me, there was two things that really got me. There was my oldest had this teacher who I can't remember what her and I got in an argument about. Actually, I do remember. They had been pulling my daughter out of class and sending her into some sort of counseling with other girls. No one explained to
We
us
talked
what it
about this
was
because she
about.
was a straight A student before that, right? And then
Right.
it affected, yeah.
Going to some sort of counseling class with all these other girls. We weren't given any information about what's going on in these. And I was upset when I found out that like this was going on. And so I sent my daughter's teacher an email and I was like, hey, what's going on? Da, da, da. We went back and forth a little bit. And she said something that really irritated me. And I said something about my daughter. And she was like, well, when she's here, she's my daughter. No, 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 no. I
Yeah.
almost died giving birth to that child. That is mine 100%. And so there was that. And then right after that, it was like the next year, the first day of school. It was my youngest first day of school. And she her teacher put her in the wrong pickup place because it was divided. Like, there were the walkers, you met them out front. There were car riders who sat in the hallway, and then the students who got on the bus went straight to the bus. And so she was supposed to be a walker. I walk out front. There's my oldest. My baby is nowhere to be found. And I am like on the verge of tears. And I see her teacher and she can tell I'm upset. And I'm like, I can't find, my daughter, like, explain what's going on. She was like, oh no, I put her in the wrong area. I'm so sorry. Here, I'll take you right to her. She takes me into where the car riders are. My youngest stands up. She was just so excited, like, that she saw me. She starts running to me, and this big mammoth of a teacher, this evil witch, grabs my kid by the back of her backpack and
Oof.
jerks her back.
Oof.
And my kid just starts crying. And there were all these kids sitting there. And I got up in her face, and as quietly as I could, I said, if you ever touch my daughter again, I will kill you. And
That's
I
what
took
your
my
mom
kid.
said to your stepmom, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So I
Nice.
took them up to the principal's office. I flipped out at the principal, and I came home to my husband, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to get arrested. Like, I'm going to go to jail if we don't take them out of school. And so we took them out of school, and it has been the best decision of my life. My oldest ended up graduating with honors. She now has a job making more than some adults I know. My youngest is, and we do it very laid back, like everybody. It's happy and relaxed and cool, and all this crap about socialization, and none of that's true. Like, it's been the most wonderful experience. My daughters are close. My family is close. Like, I wish I had never sent them to public school to begin with.
It's so people that watch the podcast know, like, I hate the word woke because I think it's become meaningless. It's as useless as the left calling everything racist and fascist and what. But what you mentioned about, like, that is my daughter. Now, if she had come to you and said, I want you to know when she's at school, like, it's your daughter, I will treat her like it's my daughter. Like, that's the level of respect and care I'll give. Okay, that's cool. But to claim that sort of ownership, and that's what I see happening in schools. And that's when people start calling things woke, which gets overplayed, we miss that part of it. That's a big part of the reason with our son. We were like, no. And now he's not. And you can ask him, like, why is there inflation? And he's like, it's because of the Federal Reserve, which we need to get rid of because it's an evil organization. And I'm like, there we go. I like that indoctrination.
I mean, I'm one of those parents, like, don't get me wrong, my kids have probably very close to the same political views that I do, but I let them know, like, when we did politics, I sat them down, and if they ever had questions, if they wanted to know my point of view, I'd tell them. If they wanted to know the other point of view, I would tell them. And I told them, this is a personal decision. Like, this isn't something that you get from mom and dad. This is something you get from what you believe is right. You know what I mean? And I made that very clear. Don't get me wrong. I'm 100% sure they both probably think the same way that I do, because we always talk about this stuff. But yeah, if someone else is going to quote unquote indoctrinate my kids, it's going to be me. I made them. They are mine. I do not, this kind of crap, our kids. No, those are my kids.
And they can rebel against us later. That's part of the fun of being a parent.
Right. But I don't want it to be because of somebody else or someone else's ideology. And no. Mm-mm.
I'm with you. I love it. So I want to be respectful of time. Just 2 more questions.
All
just pure North Carolina questions. So as I said at the beginning, we're transplants. My son was born in North Carolina. We're from Charlotte. I know a lot of the rest of North Carolina considers that sort of but I do love this city. Whatever. As to me, our family is a transplant, but for 15 years now too. What advice would you have for us or other people moving here about just the magic of the state of North Carolina? How can we enjoy it? How can we preserve it? How can we improve it?
I think really it's just all about, what is it? There was a quote I posted the other day about North Carolina, and it's basically, you don't change North Carolina. You let North Carolina change you. And North Carolina, like I said, as far as the locals go, like, they're really just salt of the earth. Like, North Carolina people are so kind and helpful. And I'm not saying that we don't get a little chip on our shoulder. Like I said, we don't fight a little bit, or we're not rebellious. But a North Carolinian will be the first one to pull over and help you if you've got a flat tire. See my husband do it 100 times. You know what I mean? We were at a grocery store not so long ago, and a lady fell, and she was older, and my youngest was the first one to rush forward and help her up. And I thought, that is the most North Carolinian thing I have ever seen. Like, here's, my young teenager helping this woman stand up, and surrounded by people who just are standing by watching. You know what I mean? Because that is the North Carolina spirit. We had a tree fall in the yard. I want to say it was last year, maybe year before last. And my sister drove up from Charlotte, her and her friend, and helped cut the tree up and helped us get it cleaned up. And, that's just this kind of thing that, from a young age in North Carolina, we learn to be helpful, to be respectful, to make sure that we're doing what is right. And so when you come to North Carolina, realize, you may not agree with everything that we do, but there's something that brought you here. And hopefully it wasn't just the job. Hopefully it was the fact that you thought it was charming and you liked the lifestyle and all these things. So be respectful of that, and be respectful of the people who live here. And not only that, try to assimilate. That's the biggest thing that you can do to help preserve North Carolina culture. If you're coming here, assimilation should be your number one goal. Like, start saying y'all. You know what I mean? Like, do things that you wouldn't normally
and
do.
Some moonshine.
Yeah, drink some moonshine, like, hell, if you want to, drive down the road and smoke a blunt with the windows down. I see that all the time, but I'm just saying, like, take part in what makes North Carolina, North Carolina. Don't move in and hate it here and hate Southerners and you want everything to change. That's just making it worse. Not only that, but you're making locals hate people move in, and that's not good for anybody. You know what I mean? That's going to create animosity that we just don't need. So move here, love people, stop hating rednecks, stop hating hillbillies. I mean, because if you're in North Carolina and a local, I'm telling you, they might not flat out be redneck, but they got a streak.
Yeah.
They might not flat out be a hillbilly, but they probably got some roots there somewhere. So be respectful. Like, I feel like, treat us the same way that you would treat anybody wherever you're from. Well, maybe not wherever you're from,
Yeah, that's
but
fair.
you know what I mean. Like,
No, I get it. I get it 100%. It's why we moved here. And I'm from DC, but then grew up in Virginia, so I don't have the Southern accent, but I've said y'all my whole life. And when I go back, I get made fun of for it, and they're like, "Did you pick that up in North Carolina?" I'm like, "No, I've always said that. I don't know, but I didn't even know that was weird until you pointed it out." So that's your advice to people coming here. My last question for you: what is someone who's never been to this state? What do you want? What message would you send to people that have not been here? What do you want them to know about North Carolina?
I think I get this from Twitter a lot, is there will always be somebody from Oregon or California or New York, and they want to talk about how racist North Carolina is. Bruh, if that's what you think about North Carolina, you've never been to North Carolina. Because I'm telling you right now, my best friend is a mixed lesbian. Okay. My brother-in-law is Black. My cousins are Native American. I have a Mexican uncle. Like, if you think that North Carolina is just backwards and all white people and we all hate everybody, nah, bro, that's not North Carolina at all. Like, you've clearly never been here. You really watch too much TV, because we all get along. Like, and that's no joke. Like, you know, since I was a kid, we all have gotten along. You know, like, we've all been one big happy North Carolina family. Don't get me wrong, we fight during sports. You know, when basketball season rolls around, we do not all get along. But
Yeah,
after
you
basketball
classically
season,
don't like Duke.
yeah, well, I mean, yeah. But whenever basketball season's over, we're all friends again, you know, like, just, and keep that in mind. Don't come down here. Racism is when somebody like really truly hates, you know, Black people or Mexican people, and I've that's not been my experience. I've lived here for 40 years and I've never seen that. Like, just reserve the judgment, get to know people, and I feel like you'll take on a whole new perspective. I think that's the biggest thing to being able to, if you're new here and you don't really know what's not what, like, meet some locals. Like, you're gonna be surprised. People really aren't what you think they are.
I love it. I love it. I agree. Come check out the state. People here are not what you think they are, and it is a wonderful place. The mountains, the Piedmont, the beaches, we got it all. Everyone, Cassie Clark, wherethedogwoodblooms.com, at Dogwood Blooms on Twitter, I believe. I'll
That's
put it all up on here. You have been a more fantastic and delightful guest than I had expected, even listening. Thank you so much for your time. I've got to figure out a way to get you back on here.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, everybody. I just have one thing to say real quick. Let's go Wolfpack. Let's go Wolfpack. Let's go Wolfpack. I had to, buddy.
See, I don't know how many people in our feed root for them. Maybe quite a few. There are a few like myself who root for the Tar Heels. And I, as a Tar Heel fan, I have to give plaudits to NC State because me as a Tar Heel fan, and I know a lot of Tar Heel fans feel the same way. NC State played the better game. NC State wanted it more. Carolina did not.
Right.
Carolina had a lot of
cheering for NC State Wolfpack. Anyway, everybody, it's Groo and Dub here, and welcome back to the program. Thank you for sticking around to the best part of this podcast. And as you can see, I'm a little bit excited about the NC State win last night, and I'm sorry for your loss, Dub, but better.
I'm not complaining. They got a number 1 seed still.
Yeah, they did.
And
but you had a number 10 seed beat a number 1 seed, and I'm saying anyone but UNC at this point. It's just where I'm at. So last night I was jacked up, and Raleigh was on fire last night. I don't know if you saw it or not, but the Carolina Hurricanes came back from a 4-2 deficit.
Yes. Oh my God. That was insane that they scored 2 goals. Aho did in the last minute and 36 seconds. And
Went
then
to a shootout. They
winning the
won
shootout.
5-2.
Yeah. But of course, it's the modern Carolina Hurricanes in Toronto. Guaranteed that Toronto is going to do some type of choking somehow.
Well, it was exciting. I was not watching the Canes game because I was too busy watching the NC State demolish UNC. But it was on a screen off to the side, so I was kind of paying attention to it, and I was so pumped up. Raleigh was on fire last night. I mean, just all wins, all W's, all excitement. I mean, it can't get any better in my world right now. It cannot get any better with sports. So,
well, here's the thing. I do not know the result, but did the Courage or NCFC play?
I didn't pay attention to the Courage game either. What happened?
Like I said, I am totally lost in those realms right now because
right now it's 2-2 tie game against Hurricane and the Senators going on right now. It's 4:09 left in the second period.
Yeah, I've got something in this game. I had Carolina Hurricanes -1.5.
Yeah,
and I had Sebastian Aho on +190 to score a goal.
What app are you using today?
Today, well, that was all in the DraftKings app.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right now, they have, I think, some of the best experiences of all the apps that I've downloaded. DraftKings, that's absolutely right. They had a bet I could not refuse last night. It was a bet that the Carolina Duke game was just going to have a score, meaning either team had to score, and that bet was -20,000, had been boosted to +100. And the max bet was $50. And I said, okay, you want to give me a free $100? Then by God, give me a free $100. Because that was one of the easiest bets I ever made, easiest $100 I ever made in my life.
So they hooked you up with $100 for betting?
Well, no, it was a $50 stake plus on a +100 that basically just doubles your money.
Okay, gotcha.
So they ended up paying me $100, which
that's awesome.
50, but still, that still puts me up in the game. So I'm not going to complain about that.
Well, you know what? I'm a little bit disappointed in you. It is St. Patty's Day.
Well, I have this. I don't know if people can see it on my hand.
Oh,
a shamrock that I drew myself. I had to because there are still people out there that abide by that. If you ain't wearing green or something, that you will get pinched. But to me, that's a violation of the NAP. And if you do me harm, I will do you harm back.
Green is a violation of the NAP.
Oh well,
you know better than that. It's the rules.
It's the rules arbitrarily posted.
It's the rules. Green on St. Patty's Day.
But isn't a pinch an assault?
No, it's an assault not to wear green.
So
assault on St. Patrick.
Well, here's the thing. Let St. Patrick do it.
No. We are followers of St. Patrick, and it's a violation not to celebrate and wear green on a day like today.
Now, if you are in celebration of St. Patrick, are you also taking part in drinking pints of Guinness or eating corned beef and cabbage?
Yes, that's going to happen after this podcast.
Oh, okay. Who
So,
fixes it in your family?
I'm going to walk down the street and get some.
Oh, okay, at the local
Tonight.
pub.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'll
So
probably have
you got a good pub down there that serves good Irish grub?
Yeah, I think there is one. It's not an Irish pub within walking distance, but I think they're celebrating today. So I'm gonna go check it out.
Okay.
So what about you? Are you gonna
No,
uh
I'm
green
taking the
beer or
rest of the
anything?
day and relaxing because
Oh.
tomorrow is a day off, but it'll be a taxing day. As for those who aren't aware, my mother got diagnosed with a form of
Oh,
leukemia.
really?
And she has to go for treatments. And every Monday I've been taking her, and this Monday is no different. And I'll be taking her tomorrow. So, but she's doing good in her fight. All the bad numbers we got a report last week went down. All the good numbers went up. So we keep rooting for that steadily, that they keep
Yeah.
going in those
Yeah.
directions.
Well, that's good. So I'm sorry to hear that.
No,
do you
it's
have a
okay.
bracket?
She's a strong lady. We will
Yeah.
persevere.
Do you have a bracket made yet?
I do not have a bracket made yet, and this is what I want to ask you. Would you like me to make an ESPN group with just me and you? And we
Yeah.
compete. And every week on this podcast, we do an update on who has more points, what games we picked right the same, wrong, or where we opposed
Well,
each other and gained points or lost points. And I think the public would like that immensely.
we should ask our audience. Send in all your questions and your yes and no's and let us know if that's something that you'd like.
Mhm.
Oh, look, we've got a whole bunch of yeses coming in. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You see all those yeses?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Looks like it's unanimous.
Yeah. I love unanimous.
Thank you, everybody. Yep. They're all
Yeah.
streaming in. Looks like we're gonna have to do it now.
Yeah. And that was a legitimate election, unlike the elections in Russia.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. Apparently, Putin won a 5th term for president, in a landslide, of course. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. It was basically vote for me or get shot. Gotta love those elections.
He basically voted to keep himself in power. Good for him. Oh,
Yeah. Absolutely. But anyway, let's get back to sports a little bit. As you know, the NFL offseason is in full swing. And, the Panthers traded Jackson for Johnson out of Pittsburgh, a wide receiver. They traded a corner for a wide receiver, went defense for offense.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was ranked 4th in separation, meaning his ability to separate in the NFL last year, which is something our receivers could not do. And so I think this is a great pickup for the Panthers, along with their 2 lineman signings to protect Bryce Young. And I think they're really doing things to help him come along. So that's good. And also, in other news, Charlotte FC lost a heartbreaker last night up in Toronto, 2-1. From the highlights that I saw, there was an uncalled penalty that could have made it 2-2. And a lot of people were upset about that. But as you know, we're still operating with replacement refs going into the 4th week. And there's still nothing that has been agreed to with the PRO people. And, but it's something I've always said in CONCACAF matches, we should just borrow some of the refs from England and the rest of Europe because they don't take any junk. and they'll throw people out of games for doing, petty stuff. And
Yeah, that's
I think it
good.
would make a better. I think it would make a better game. But anyway,
Yes. We're gonna have to make it to a football game this summer.
yeah, we might have to. And
Yeah.
that would be great if we could do that, and then we could give our perspectives. Or well, I'm not sure we could live stream because we'd be on
Talked
somebody
about
else's
doing it
property.
live from a game. We've talked about it before. We just haven't
Yeah,
done it.
but you know how Tepper is and Tepper's ego. If it's something he can't make money off of, he won't do it.
Why don't we try to get him in on an interview and see if he'll talk to us?
We'll see. And
We'll
my
have
apologies to our
reach out
audience,
to him.
but
See
my
if-
natural light is fading here in this part of North Carolina, so I'm going to create some artificial light if
All right.
y'all don't mind.
I'm good on the light, I think. It is getting a little dark out there. So anyway, I'm still buzzing from last night. I could not believe NC State pulled that off. It's been 37 years since they won the ACC championship.
Yeah.
And did you know they had the exact same stats 37 years ago? They beat Duke. They turned around and beat Virginia. Then they turned around and beat UNC. And guess where it was? DC.
The old Capitol Center.
It was exactly the same stats 37 years ago. Tell me that's not weird.
Well, that was 3 in 3 days. What State did was 5 and 5, which had only been done once before by the Cardiac Cats of Kimball Walker and those Yukon Huskies of 09.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
just
hard to
think it's
do,
so
but
weird.
it has now been shown to be done twice. And it's the same thing as when a 16 has beaten a 1. It happened once, and then it happened 4 years later. And nobody thought it would ever happen again. And it's like, every seed for themselves. You cannot take any game off. You cannot take any game lightly. And especially now with NIL in college, if you notice something here, Groo, I think NIL has helped college in this manner. Did you notice how many seniors and juniors were on that floor last night? Yeah, I see that. But my thing is, have you seen the number of seniors and juniors this year? And I'm talking across all of college basketball. They have no reason to jump to the NBA anymore because they can make millions of dollars staying in school and then make the really big money when they take the leap. And I think that is a reason why some of them could stay now 3 and 4 years, because
they got to treat them good or they'll put
they have no impetus to go to the next level.
Trade roster. They'll be
they'll
to be traded in a minute if you don't treat them right nowadays.
Well, here's the other thing.
They'll put themselves on the transfer portal.
Yeah, but if you build a good rapport with your teammates, you see this with RJ Davis and Baycott. They're like brothers, and they wanted to come back together and try to win this thing. I mean, other places are doing that too. I mean, just tons of seniors and juniors just stay in school 3 and 4 years again, like it used to be. And you're seeing those people get drafted into the NBA and becoming role players.
Right.
And I think it'll be a good thing for college basketball. It's going to be a great thing for college football because you're going to start to see the same thing happen to college football as happening to college basketball, as other teams that were little schools. I'm talking like, like many, many years ago, Gonzaga was not the household name it was today. Gonzaga was just this little school from Spokane, Washington that, everybody knew John Stockton went to, woo. And they would every other year make like a 10 seed in the NCAA tournament, make a little run and, whatever. But then there was that one year they made that Elite Eight run and Mark Few got those recruits. And now the turnover is such in a way that they are competitors in and out for NCAA tournaments every year. And they're a stalwart, like a Duke or a Carolina or, any of the other big schools.
Yeah. Right.
And so that's why I think NIL has been good. And NIL has been good for the Olympic sports.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Livy Dunn down at LSU, a gymnast. If she didn't have NIL, nobody would have known who she was. But because she can make all that money and all that stuff coming from Instagram, everybody knows who she is.
Yeah.
That's why LSU is selling out a gym to watch a gymnast compete.
Yeah.
It's why Caitlin Clark can be in a State Farm commercial now, the most recognizable face in women's college basketball.
Right.
And it's a great thing. When you open the market will work. And
Isn't
that's
that
what I
amazing
think
how
we
the
need
free
to see in
market
the
works
rest
in
of
sports as
society.
well? Isn't that cool?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I say bring it on, bring it on.
Yeah. So my question for you told me this the other day. You were going to tell me which app is the best since North Carolina has now passed sports betting. The government's now allowing us to bet legally. Not that people weren't doing it illegally before.
Right.
Now it's legal. Thank you, government, for that. We thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting us do what we want to do a little bit with our own money. That's really nice of you. So now that it's allowed by Governor Cooper, which app should I download and start with? Which do you recommend out of all 7 of them or whatever there is?
Well, I will tell you, I have downloaded 6 of them.
Okay.
And those 6 are ESPN Bet, DraftKings, FanDuel, Caesars, BetMGM, and Bet365. They all have their pros and cons. I will just say this. One of the 2 that I like that have the best user interfaces, believe it or not, are DraftKings and BetMGM. The verification process was a little more cumbersome with ESPN Bet and Caesars, especially Caesars. Caesars, I actually had to wait like 3 hours before they could verify me, even though I gave them a selfie and my, government issued ID.
Caesars is really where it all happens anyway. That's the big original sports betting location in Vegas. That's where you want to go, is Caesar's Palace.
Well, that's who is building the casino in Danville, Virginia.
Oh, okay.
It's Caesars.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
I can see why that's a really good one.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. But they were really stringent on their ID requirements.
I mean, that is not a bad thing.
No, that's not a bad thing, but it should. I'll put it to you this way. ESPN Bet did me the same way. They wanted a picture of the ID and me to take a selfie. And for some reason, take a handprint photo, but that was just weird. But I was approved in literally like a minute.
Right.
Through there, I guess they might have some type of AI assistance. to verify.
Probably. Yeah.
And so, that was that. That actually wasn't too bad. Of course, with ESPN Bet, you get some personalities from ESPN doing their own little parlays or own little odds or anything like that if you're
Right.
into that. But like I say, BetMGM's user face is just really good for typing in things. But I want to applaud too for this. Bet365 and FanDuel, when they give you your bonuses, you are free to use your bonuses any way you wish.
Cool.
Meaning you can bet as little or as much as you want. On all the other sites, they're done in little 20 or 25 or 50 or $10, packets that you have to bet that amount.
Gotcha.
And if you don't use all your money up, you forfeit that money because most of the money expires in 7 to 14 days.
Gotcha. Okay.
So when they tell you it's, bet $5 or bet $10, get $250, $300, you'll get it, but you'll mostly get in these packets and you'll have to use them in a specific amount of time. You just can't hold on to the money. That is not free money yet and then when you put that up as stake, when they pay you the winnings, you just get the winnings. You don't get the winnings plus the stake back.
Right.
So
got you.
So
well,
I
that's
hope
good
that
to know.
everybody understands
down
that.
on that. I was
wondering. I hope everybody understands that. And
yeah,
also some of them
kind of the best.
And some of them even do 101 classes for those not familiar with what lines mean, what a push means, what terminology. So they want people to do it, but here's the major thing about the whole thing. For those opposed to it, you don't have to do it. Nobody's holding a gun to anybody's head, forcing them to gamble. And in fact, every time you log into any of these sites, it says, do you have a gambling problem? If you think you do, you go to either morethanagame.northcarolina.com or call this 1-800 number. So they have the fail safes to prevent you from overdoing it.
Right.
Because they want to keep you as a customer. They don't want to lose customers.
And we know how well that works with alcohol. So that's bound.